World history, global history or transnational history is a field of historical study that emerged as a distinct academic field in the 1980s. It examines history from a global perspective. It is not to be confused with comparative history, which, like world history, deals with the history of multiple cultures and nations, but does not do so on a global scale. World history looks for common patterns that emerge across all cultures. World historians use a thematic approach with two major focal points: integration and difference. Establishment of the field. The advent of world history as a distinct academic field of study can be traced to 1980s, and was heralded by the creation of the World History Association and graduate programs at a handful of universities. Over the next decades, scholarly publications, professional and academic organizations, and graduate programs in world history proliferated. World history has often displaced Western civilization in the required curriculum of American high schools and universities, and is supported by new textbooks with a world history approach. Organizations. The H-World Discussion List serves as a network of communication among practitioners of world history, with discussions among scholars, announcements, syllabi, bibliographies and book reviews. The International Society for the Comparative Study of Civilizations approaches world history from the standpoint of comparative civilizations. Founded at a conference in 1961 in Salzburg, Austria, that was attended by Othmar Anderle, P.T. Room-Sorokin, and Arnold J. Toynbee. This is an international association of scholars that publishes a journal, Comparative Civilization Review, and hosts an annual meeting in cities around the world. The Journal of World History has been published quarterly by the World History Association since 1990. World History Association, established in the 1980s, the WHA is predominantly an American phenomenon. History. Pre-modern. The study of world history, as distinct from national history, has existed in many world cultures. However, early forms of world history were not truly global, and were limited to only the regions known by the historian. In ancient China, Chinese world history, that of China and the surrounding people of East Asia, was based on the dynastic cycle articulated by Sima Qian in circa 100 BC. Sima Qian's model is based on the mandate of heaven. Rulers rise when they united China, then are overthrown when a ruling dynasty became corrupt. Each new dynasty begins virtuous and strong, but then decays, provoking the transfer of heaven's mandate to a new ruler. The test of virtue in a new dynasty is success in being obeyed by China and neighboring barbarians. After 2,000 years, Sima Qian's model still dominates scholarship, although the dynastic cycle is no longer used for modern Chinese history. In ancient Greece, Herodotus, as founder of Greek historiography, presents insightful and lively discussions of the customs, geography, and history of Mediterranean peoples, particularly the Egyptians. However, his great rival Thucydides promptly discarded Herodotus's all-embracing approach to history, offering instead a more precise, sharply focused monograph dealing not with vast empires over the centuries but with 27 years of war between Athens and Sparta. In Rome, the vast, patriotic history of Rome by Livy approximated Herodotean inclusiveness. Polybius aspired to combine the logical rigor of Thucydides with the scope of Herodotus. In Central Asia, the secret history of Mongols is regarded as the single significant native Mongolian account of Genghis Khan. The secret history is regarded as a piece of classic literature in both Mongolia and the rest of the world. In the Middle East, Alauddin-Ata Malik-Uvana was a Persian historian who wrote an account of the Mongol Empire entitled Tarikh-i-Jahangosha. The standard edition of Yuvana is published under the title Tariq-i Jahan Gusher, ed. Mirza Muhammad Kazwini, 3-volume, Gibb Memorial Series 16. An English translation by John Andrew Boyle. The History of the World Conqueror was republished in 1997. Rashid al-Din Fad al-Hamadani was a Persian physician of Jewish origin, polymathic writer and historian, who wrote an enormous Islamic history, the Jami al-Tawariq, in the Persian language. Often considered a landmark in intercultural historiography and a key document on the Ilkhanids. His encyclopedic knowledge of a wide range of cultures from Mongolia to China to the steppes of Central Eurasia to Persia, the Arab lands, and Europe provide the most direct access to information on the late Mongol era. His descriptions also highlight the manner in which the Mongol Empire and its emphasis on trade resulted in an atmosphere of cultural and religious exchange and intellectual ferment, resulting in the transmission of a host of ideas from east to west and vice versa. One Arab scholar, Ibn Khaldun, broke with traditionalism and offered a model of historical change in Muqaddimah, an exposition of the methodology of scientific history. Ibn Khaldun focused on the reasons for the rise and fall of civilization, arguing that the causes of change are to be sought in the economic and social structure of society. His work was largely ignored in the Muslim world. Otherwise, the Muslim, Chinese and Indian intellectuals held fast to a religious traditionalism, leaving them unprepared to advise national leaders on how to confront the European intrusion into Asia after 1500. Early modern. During the Renaissance in Europe, history was written about states or nations. The study of history changed during the Enlightenment and Romanticism. Voltaire described the history of certain ages that he considered important, rather than describing events in chronological order. History became an independent discipline. It was not called Philosophia Historiae anymore, but merely history. Giambattista Vico in Italy wrote Scienza Nuova Seconda in 1725, which argued history as the expression of human will and deeds. He thought that men are historical entities and that human nature changes over time. Each epoch should be seen as a whole in which all aspects of culture, art, religion, philosophy, politics, and economics are interrelated. Vico showed that myth, poetry, and art are entry points to discovering the true spirit of a culture. Vico outlined a conception of historical development in which great cultures, like Rome, undergo cycles of growth and decline. His ideas were out of fashion during the Enlightenment, but influenced the Romantic historians after 1800. A major theoretical foundation for world history was given by German philosopher G. W. F. Hegel, who saw the modern Prussian state as the latest stage of world development. Contemporary world history became a popular genre in the 20th century with universal history. In the 1920s, several bestsellers dealt with the history of the world, including Surveys the Story of Mankind by Hendrik Willem van Loon and The Outline of History by H. G. Wells. Influential writers who have reached wide audiences include H. G. Wells, Oswald Spengler, Arnold J. Toynbee, P. T. Room Sorokin, Carol Quigley, Christopher Dawson, and Lewis Mumford. Scholars working the field include Eric Vogelin, William Hardy McNeill and Michael Mann. Spengler's Decline of the West compared 9 organic cultures: Egyptian, Indian, Chinese, Classical, Byzantine, Aztec, Arabian, Mayan, and Western. His book was a smashing success among intellectuals worldwide as it predicted the disintegration of European and American civilization after a violent age of Caesarism, arguing by detailed analogies with other civilizations. It deepened the post-World War I pessimism in Europe, and was warmly received by intellectuals in China, India, and Latin America who hoped his predictions of the collapse of European empires would soon come true. In 1936 to 1954, Toynbee's 10-volume A Study of History came out in 3 separate installments. He followed Spengler in taking a comparative topical approach to independent civilizations. Toynbee said they displayed striking parallels in their origin, growth, and decay. Toynbee rejected Spengler's biological model of civilizations as organisms with a typical lifespan of 1,000 years. Like C. McKeown, Toynbee explained decline is due to their moral failure. Many readers rejoiced in his implication that only a return to some form of Catholicism could halt the breakdown of Western civilization, which began with the Reformation. Volumes 7 to 10, published in 1954, abandoned the religious message, and his popular audience slipped away, while scholars picked apart his mistakes. McNeill wrote The Rise of the West to improve upon Toynbee by showing how the separate civilizations of Eurasia interacted from the very beginning of their history, borrowing critical skills from one another, and thus precipitating still further changes. Adjustment between traditional old and borrowed new knowledge and practice became necessary. McNeill took a broad approach organized around the interactions of peoples across the earth. Such interactions have become both more numerous and more continual and substantial in recent times. Before about 1500, the network of communication between cultures was that of Eurasia. The term for these areas of interaction differ from one world historian to another and include world system and ecumena. Whatever it is called, the importance of these intercultural contacts has begun to be recognized by many scholars. History education. United States. In college curricula of the United States, world history became a popular replacement for courses on Western civilization. Beginning in the 1970s, Professors Patrick Manning, previously of Northeastern University and now at the University of Pittsburgh's World History Center, and Ross E. Dunn at San Diego State are leaders in promoting innovative teaching methods in schools of architecture in the U.S. The National Architectural Accrediting Board now requires that schools teach history that includes a non-West or global perspective. This reflects a decade-long effort to move past the standard Eurocentric approach that had dominated the field. Recent themes. In recent years, the relationship between African and world history has shifted rapidly from one of antipathy to one of engagement and synthesis. Reynolds surveys the relationship between African and world histories, with an emphasis on the tension between the area studies paradigm and the growing world history emphasis on connections and exchange across regional boundaries. A closer examination of recent exchanges and debates over the merits of this exchange is also featured. Reynolds sees the relationship between African and world history as a measure of the changing nature of historical inquiry over the past century. Marx and theory of history. The Marxist theory of historical materialism claims the history of the world is fundamentally determined by the material conditions at any given time. In other words, the relationships which people have with each other in order to fulfill basic needs such as feeding, clothing and housing themselves and their families. Overall, Marx and Engels claim to have identified 5 successive stages of the development of these material conditions in Western Europe. The theory divides the history of the world into the following periods: primitive communism, slave society, feudalism, capitalism, and socialism. Marx argued that the system was ironclad, and all of the stages were essential and inevitable. Regner Darnell and Frederick Leach argue that, in the Soviet Union, the Marxian theory of history was the only accepted orthodoxy, and inadvertently stifled research into other schools of thought on history. However, adherents of Marx's theories argue that Stalin's distortions of Marxism cannot be attributed to flaws in Marxian theoretics itself. World historians. Christopher Bailey, The Birth of the Modern World, Global Connections and Comparisons, 1780 to 1914. Philip D. Curtin, The World and the West, The European Challenge and the Overseas Response in the Age of Empire. 308 pp. ISBN 978-0-521-77135-1. Online review. Christopher Dawson, Religion and the Rise of Western Culture, or excerpt and text search. Will Durant and Ariel Durant, Story of Civilization. Francis Fukuyama, The End of History and the Last Man. Peter Haugen, Professor of the University of Wisconsin, writer of World History for Dummies. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, Philosopher of World History. Patrick Manning, Navigating World History. Historians Create a Global Past. William Hardy McNeill, See Especially the Rise of the West, A History of the Human Community. Robert McNeill and William H. McNeill, The Human Web, A Bird's Eye View of World History, excerpt and text search. Jürgen Osterhammel, The Transformation of the World, A Global History of the 19th Century, excerpt. Max Ostrovsky, Y=ARCTGX, The Hyperbola of the World Order, 2007. Carol Quigley, The Evolution of Civilizations, Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time, Weapons Systems and Political Stability, A History. P.T. Ream-Sorokin, Russian-American Macro-Sociology, Social and Cultural Dynamics. Oswald Spengler, German, Decline of the West, Volume 1 online, Volume 2 online, excerpt and text search, abridged edition. Peter Stearns, USA, World History in Brief. Major Patterns of Change and Continuity, 7th ed. Encyclopedia of World History, 6th ed. Luke Norman Tellier, Canadian, Urban World History, PUQ, 650 pages, online edition. Arnold J. Toynbee, British, A Study of History, see especially A Study of History. Eric Vogel, An Order and History. Emanuel Wallerstein, World Systems, Leftist but not Marxist. Bibliography. Surveys of World History. Bailey, Christopher Allen. The Birth of the Modern World, 1780 to 1914. Global Connections and Comparisons. Bullitt, Richard A. L. The Earth and Its Peoples, 6th ed. 2 volume, 2014, University Textbook. Diker, William J. Diker and Jackson J. Spielvogel. World History, University Textbook. Gombrich, Ernst. A Little History of the World. Grenville, J.A.S. A History of the World, from the 20th to the 21st Century. McKay, John P. and Bennett D. Hill. A History of World Societies, University Textbook. McNeill, William H. A World History, University Textbook. McNeill, William H. Jerry H. Bentley, and David Christian, eds. Berkshire Encyclopedia of World History. Osterhammel, Jürgen. The Transformation of the World. A Global History of the 19th Century, 1167 pp. Roberts, M. and O. A. Westad. The History of the World. Rosenberg, Emily, A.L., eds. A World Connecting. 1870 to 1945. Stearns, Peter N., ed. Oxford Encyclopedia of the Modern World, 1750 to the Present. Stearns, Peter N. The Industrial Revolution in World History Online Edition. SZULC, TAD. Then and Now. How the World Has Changed Since WW. 2. 515p. ISBN 0-688-07558-4. Popular History. Tenure, Robert A. L. Worlds Together, Worlds Apart. A History of the World, University Textbook. Watt. C. Frank Spencer, Neville Brown. A History of the World in the 20th Century. Historiography. Adis, Michael. Essays on 20th Century History. Historiographic Essays on World History Conceptualizing the Long 20th Century. From the 1870s to the early 2000s. Bentley, Jerry H. ed. The Oxford Handbook of World History. Bentley, Jerry H. Shapes of World History in 20th Century Scholarship. Essays on Global and Comparative History Series. Costello, Paul. World Historians in the Goals. 20th Century Answers to Modernism. Curtin, Philip D. Depth, Span, and Relevance. The American Historical Review, Volume 89, No. 1, pp. 1-9 in JSTOR. Dunn, Rossi, ed. The New World History. A Teacher's Companion. 607 pp. ISBN 978-0-312-18327. 1 online review. Fry, Northrop. Spengler Revisited, in Northrop Frye on Modern Culture, pp. 297-382, first published 1974, online. Hare, Lawrence, and Jack Wells. Promising the World. Surveys, Curricula, and the Challenge of Global History. History Teacher, 48 pp. 371-88. Hughes Warrington, Marnie. Palgrave Advances in World Histories, 256 pp. Articles by scholars. Lang, Michael. Globalization and Global History in Toynbee, Journal of World History 22-4 December, 2011 pp. 747-783 in Project Muse. McInnes, Neil. The Great Doomsayer. Oswald Spengler Reconsidered. National Interest 1997. 65-76. ISSN 0884-9382. Full text. EBSCO. McNeill, William H. The Changing Shape of World History, History and Theory 1995 34. 8-26. ISSN 0018-2656 in JSTOR. Manning, Patrick. Navigating World History. Historians Create a Global Past, an important guide to the entire field. Excerpt and text search. Online review. Maiselish, Bruce. Comparing Global History to World History, Journal of Interdisciplinary History, Volume 28, No. 3, pp. 385-395 in JSTOR. National Center for History in the Schools at UCLA. World History. The Big Eras, A Compact History of Humankind, 96 pp. Nyberg, Michael S. Warfare in World History Online Edition. O'Brien, Patrick K., ed. Atlas of World History. Patel, Klaus Kiran. Transnational History, European History Online, Mainz. Institute of European History. Retrieved November 11, 2011. Richards, Michael D. Revolutions in World History Online Edition. Rupp, Heidi, ed. Teaching World History. A Resource Book. 274 pp. Online Edition. Smile, Vaclav. Energy in World History Online Edition. Tellier, Luke Normand. Urban World History, PUQ, 650 pages, Online Edition. Dukov, M. Al. Theoretical Problems of the World Historical Process. Watts, Sheldon. Disease and Medicine in World History Online Edition.